Good evening, everyone. How are you today? Doing well? Okay, it's awesome. Our students look great. 안녕하세요. That is hello in Korean. My name is Susan Park, and I'm the co-chair of BAAFN's ninth What Does It Mean to Be Asian American Essay Contest. A big thank you to the Coolidge Corner Theatre for the space that they've provided tonight so that we can have our award ceremony here. So thank you so much. And isn't the renovation lovely? This is so awesome. And congratulations to them as well. And thank you also to the Brookline Interactive Group who's in the back and they're recording us. And once they have the recording done, it's going to be shared within the town. So thank you to Big. And so I'm so glad to see the students who are here today. You all are amazing. I loved your essays. And I also want to applaud all the 26 participants who wrote and submitted your essays. I'm so proud of you. I read all 26 essays, and they are so insightful, creative, nuanced, and so expressive. So well done. Keep writing and expressing yourselves. To all the students who emailed in an essay, the Brookline Booksmith has generously donated a gift certificate for you. So we will mail them out to you. So thank you to Brookline Booksmith as well. Thank you. And Mistral and the Columbus Hospitality Group donated a gift card for our BAAFN award winner tonight. So you will get that too. So now on to why you are here. Tonight you will hear from 5 winning essay writers as they answer the question, what does it mean to be Asian American? Each essay is so unique, so different, and each one takes us on a journey into what it means to be Asian American through the eyes of 5 wonderful students who are sitting in our front row. And we also have a surprise for you. We have a keynote speaker. Mira T. Lee will be speaking tonight, and she will be signing books at the end of the award ceremony. So please stick around. We have pizza, cake, and we want to celebrate with the celebrants. So thank you so much. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my co-chair, Giles Lee, and he will introduce the BAAFN winners. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Susan. I'm Giles. Let me just say I'm so impressed by the incredible young people that we're highlighting tonight. Not just their talent, which is apparent, you will see in these essays, but because of their thoughtfulness and their willingness to share themselves, their stories, use their voices. And as the convener of the judges panel, I had the opportunity to read every application and do prep calls with all of our winners. And I just walked away from those conversations feeling really proud and really inspired to be in community with them. I feel really hopeful for our future and also for our present, knowing that we have role models like them in our community. I have 3 children in the Brookline schools. I would say my experience as an Asian American parent has been rocky. Sometimes it's been great and we felt included, and sometimes we haven't and felt as an afterthought. I think I speak for BAAFN as well as the judges when I say that we all were so moved and so encouraged that this community has come together tonight to celebrate and recognize our young people. And I hope that all young people, my own children and other kids like them, will know that this diverse community exists here in Brookline that cares about them and cares about their well-being. Before I introduce our first essay winner, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to our judges, Lisa Flores, John Hodgman, Stephanie Nist, Caitlin Starr, Grace Talusan, and Abba Taylor. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first essay award winner. Our BAAFN award winner is Haley Kim, a junior at Brookline High who is also a product of Runkle School. Anybody from Runkle School in the house? I see your sweatshirt, so I knew. She lives with her parents and her younger brother and loves spending time with them on walks to places like Waldstein Park. Haley pours her heart into the APAC steering committee and the school orchestra, and outside of school is a competitive gymnast. even shares her expertise as a coach, inspiring other young people to reach for the stars. Writing her essay was a reflective experience for Haley, sparked by an experience celebrating the Lunar New Year at school. Haley dedicates her essay to her grandparents, whose love and wisdom continue to shape her journey. So please welcome Haley Kim.
Dancers donning glimmering silk hanbok stand on a well-lit stage. Gold embellishments on their sleeves sparkle in the stage light, and their lustrous pink skirts rain down in billows around their feet to brush the ground as they dance. Each of them holds a wooden puche, a traditional Korean fan, in each hand. The pink ruffles of the fans flutter magically as the dancers prance around the stage in perfect unity. These are puchechum dancers, and they are dancing a traditional Korean fan dance. I like to think that language is a lot like this dance. At the height of the performance, the dancers move their fans together in undulating wave motions as if breathing together. Each dancer seems to represent a different letter or character in a language, and they all come together in a combined effort to spell out words with their movements, words that string themselves into sentences and turn into conversation as the dance progresses. They put on a spectacular performance, and it looks effortless. For me, this stage is not as well lit. The stage lights have been dimmed, and the dancers that once pranced in perfect unity now stumble, losing their balance and falling to the floor. I used to be fluent in Korean, communicating with my exclusively Korean-speaking grandparents with ease. Words used to tumble off my tongue with little effort, stringing themselves into beautiful, coherent sentences. But now all that remains of my spoken Korean are fragments of sounds that struggle to piece together even just individual words. Perhaps it was the moment I started school when I stopped speaking Korean. Maybe it was that I was one of the only Asian children in my over 20-person kindergarten class that made me realize I was different. Or maybe it was that I'd never seen an Asian teacher until the 4th grade that made me feel alone. Maybe it was my friends' lunchboxes stocked full of American snacks that made me look at the unique flavors of my own lunch as a little bit too exotic. That the culture that had defined my childhood was too strange for others to understand and thus needed to be tucked away and hidden. The language I once saw as gracious and special seemed to me as entirely void of purpose. As I grew older, I found myself stumbling over the words I used to dance through. I developed an embarrassment of my American-sounding accent when I spoke Korean. I hesitated to speak in front of real Koreans in fear that my lousy accent would make them judge me for not maintaining my Korean roots. When I speak with my grandparents over Kakao Talk, the words I want to say tangle up in knots of brittle thread in the back of my throat and stick themselves deep in the crevices of my heart like an unrelenting glue. I see their faces twist in confusion and sadness as they try to decipher my broken words. It's even more disappointing that I lost this connection to my culture because of my own neglect and embarrassment. I often question to what extent I have earned the right to call myself a Korean. Because how can I retain the fact that I am Korean despite not speaking any? Does that mean my Koreanness becomes finite with my appearance and is incapable of reaching any further? Am I just an American cosplaying as a Korean with no qualifications, or perhaps is it the other way around? Korean soil is just as foreign of a land to me as any other country in the world, and what I define as my home lies in the United States. When your identity finds its roots in multiple places and none of them define you as truly yours, where should your heart reach out to for open arms? I realize there are no definite answers to these questions. It's easy to worry about others' perceptions of your culture and your connection to it, but not as easy to find value in your own unique cultural experiences. The only person that can lend me the courage to reconnect with the Korean language is myself. The only thing holding me back from making this reconnection is my own embarrassment at my failure to do so for so long. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. Like the Puchechum dancers, I hope to build back my connection to the Korean language and learn to once again dance through the graceful Korean words I put aside for so long.
Wow, that was amazing. That was so insightful and that was really inspiring. Thank you so much for your honesty. Thank you. And me being Korean also, I could totally see the fan dance. So awesome. Okay, so on to our content award winner, Kiran Bhatia is a junior at BHS who went to Runkle School. Kiran is engaged in various school activities like student government, mock trial, and writing for the Cypress. Beyond school, you'll find him volunteering at Rosie's Place and has been a fellow and volunteer with Next Generation Politics. Awesome. Writing this essay was a therapeutic experience for Kiran and gave him an opportunity to connect more deeply with his family, including his parents and twin brother, but particularly his grandmother. Kiran dedicates his essay to both his grandmother and grandfather, who encourage him to connect with his heritage. Come on up.
I used to revel in the smell of my grandmother's freshly cooked puris, the aroma of the hot oil, and the sight of her famed mint chutney warming my heart when we visited her suburban New York home in the summer. Every afternoon, my grandmother, my dali, would make puris that I would excitedly fill with keema and leftover chicken tikka. Every night, she would read to me the Ek Onkar, watching with pride as I celebrated and reaffirmed my Sikh faith. I never felt prouder of my Indian heritage. As I returned to school that fall, a mere fourth grader, I was not greeted with the same celebration of my identity by my peers. As my teacher warmly asked my peers and me to explain our heritage on the first day of school, I felt excited to say that I was a biracial mix of Asian and white, celebrating the cultures that had become so ingrained within me. But as I announced to the class that I was Asian, I heard snickering and I saw confused expressions on the faces of my classmates. Even from some of my closest friends, I heard, "Really? Indian? You?" I heard people remark how surprised they were, saying, "You must not be that Asian." Then my teacher moved on to the next student as if nothing had happened. But I felt humiliated and I felt ashamed. I thought back to the afternoons with my dadi spent devouring her puris and the nights I spent learning more and more about the history of our Sikh faith. I loved my culture so much, yet that seemingly escaped my most trusted friends. I thought I had let down my dad, my dadi, and every Indian family member who I loved and looked up to. I had failed them, I thought. For years after, I didn't identify as Asian. I ignored it. I wanted to spare myself of the embarrassment and the disappointment of hearing the surprise of those around me. Suddenly I felt Indian in name only, as if the only thing that connected me to the beautiful Indian customs of my dali was a birth certificate. It wasn't until one day, as I watched an Indian soap opera with her that she liked, that I finally told her what had been weighing on me for years. "I don't feel Indian," I said. "I don't feel like I belong." I described to her the hurt I felt when I heard the surprise in my friends' voices when I told them I was Indian, how disappointed I felt that I was unable to communicate with her in any of her native tongues, and how angry I was that my fair skin confused my connection to my Indian heritage. I felt Indian-ish at best. "Kiran," my dadi told me, "you can never allow others to define who you are. If they don't see you as Indian, that doesn't make you any less Indian," she told me. "No one can take away your culture from you. Only you can make the decision to celebrate and love the traditions that make our family strong." Hearing my dadi's words, I shook my head at my silliness. I was Indian, and no one could ever take that away from me. Now when asked about my ethnicity, I declare that I'm a mix of Indian and white, stressing the indelible mark that my Indian heritage has left on me and the family stories that make up a facet of my ethnicity. I declare my Indian heritage to others with pride, but it took years of struggle to get there, not just with the world around me, but with my own confusion about my identity. But that's the beauty of my Asian American identity. My heritage is a story of resilience and strength, just as my dadi helped me realize. Thank you.
Okay. Elasmar is a winner of our Creativity Award. He's a junior at Brookline High, graduate of Runkle School. Runkle School is very well represented tonight, with a passion for writing and graphic design. He's the incoming editor-in-chief of The Cypress, BHS's school paper, and says one of his favorite places to be is in the Cypress room at school. Gio not only leads with his words, but also his actions. Outside of school, he and his twin brother co-founded an initiative focused on understanding student stress, and he also volunteers with the Digital Wellness Lab. Gio's essay is about his beautifully complex identity, and he dedicates it to the very people who shaped him, his parents and his brother. So please welcome Gio.
In Malaysia, the language of reunion is loud. They have grown so tall, relatives remark, their hands caressing my and my brother's hair and cheeks. I dance from one to another with careful choreography, swift hugs for those whose arms are open, kisses for the aunties and handshakes for their husbands, articulated thank yous for English compliments, wide smiles and glances to my mother for Cantonese ones. In my hands, 7 years of accumulated red packets remind me of my long absence. I orient them like a fan and send cool air to my face. In Malaysia, heat is dense, sticky. It clings to my hair, dampens my skin, lingers in my chest until each breath becomes meticulous, each movement strict. My room with its 3 incessantly oscillating fans consumes more electricity than we can afford, my grandfather jokes. I'll have to return some red packets. I laugh, wipe my forehead dry, and wonder how he and the rest of my family survive, how their eyes blink so indifferently, how their hair ignores the moisture, how their lungs withstand the air. In Malaysia, everything feels outside of my control, all jumbled and unfamiliar. At dinner, our conference-sized table saturates with family fast. Everyone seems to recall my size as a child, yet I do not recall a single face. Later, when only street lamps and phone flashlights grant outdoor vision, we saunter to the silken tofu stand, where my tongue is left burnt from the hot syrup and my skin burns under the vendor's contemptuous stares that whisper, "I know you are not from here." That night, I can't fall asleep. With each heavy inhale, I summon another memory of feeling detached from a country I thought I knew. With each exhale, one question. Why? Is it that I'm too American? Too accustomed to the sharp chill of Massachusetts winters and the salty Cape Cod wind of summers? Perhaps my tongue is not built to bend with the laws and woes of Cantonese. Perhaps my nose is too long to breathe that sticky air, my eyes too deep set to blink in it with ease. In my mother's own country, I feel as unwelcome as the bones in a steamed fish, interrupting the velvety bites of flesh. But as I awake to the fan's mundane hums and step outside my room, my grandmother surprises me with a bowl of cut jackfruit. "For you," she says, her smile like sunlight. And maybe it's my grandmother's smile, or maybe it's the rapidly surfacing memories of boyhood that the jackfruit ushers back, but somehow, somewhere in my brain, something clicks. Why dwell on the quest for belonging when I can embrace the person I already am, the person whom my grandparents already shower with unwavering love? I can bask in the sticky heat's unfamiliarity and laugh when droplets descend from my forehead. I can smile when the silken tofu's ginger syrup jolts me with its heat, and then I can learn to blow on my next bite. I can breathe the dense air that nourished my mother, because she breathes the salty Cape Cod air that nourished me, and neither of us turned out all that different. Sure, my brow is thick and eyes deep set, but my blood is still rich with the DNA of my ancestors, even those with whom I cannot communicate, whose names I cannot pronounce, whose faces I cannot recall. I know I am American. No less American than I ever was, for that is an ingrained quality, one glued to my skin like the sticky heat. And as my grandmother's hands push the bowl of thoroughly prepared jackfruit towards me, I realize that I am Malaysian too. I am as Malaysian as the silken tofu vendor, as the aunties who greet me in Cantonese, as my grandparents, as my mother, because what makes me Malaysian is not the language I speak, nor the faces I remember. It is all I have inherited. Family who loudly rejoice at my arrival, 2 loving grandparents who make me feel at home in a country time zones away from my own. So I revisit that sleep-depriving question. Why do I not belong? And I see that it is answerless. Because belonging, I now understand, is embracing what is me. It is welcoming my Americanness and knowing that it does not obstruct my Malaysian identity, that the two can exist harmoniously. because in Malaysia, I finally realize I belong.
Melanie Ho is a winner of the Creativity Award and a junior at BHS, formerly at the Ridley School. She rows for BHS crew and sits on the steering committee for APAC. Beyond her school commitments, you will find her at her job at Cafe Japonais or engaging in her hobbies, going for walks, crocheting, or drawing. She was motivated to use this year's contest as an opportunity to reflect on the time she spends playing mahjong with her family and how meaningful it is. Melanie lives with her parents, her brother and sister, and her grandpa in the same building, and dedicates this win to her family and extended family for playing, quote, excessive midnight mahjong, as well as NECYSC for teaching her the way. Please welcome Melanie.
This is reading in between the lines. Mahjong tiles are dealt randomly. Some hands are luckier than others, but regardless of your hand, you must carve your own path. Mahjong's square formation of 4 walls, each 18 tiles wide and 2 tiles tall, allows for rapid-fire gameplay, gossip, and a great metaphor of what it means to be Asian American. Winning requires 14 tiles, 4 triples, and 1 double being the most conventional method. The last tile is obtained by drawing from the walls or taking a discarded tile. There are 3 suits: dots, bamboo, and numbers. A hand that has all tiles from one suit is more powerful than a mixed hand. Triples consist of sequences or 3-of-a-kinds. 3-of-a-kinds are worth more because they are harder to get. Only 4 of each tile are in a set. Under the scrambling and clacking of tiles lie characters that I don't understand. The green dragon tile reads in green strokes, meaning prosperity, according to Google. Yet, with all the tiles in the case, I struggle with finding a pair or triples to commit to. Initially, there are so many tiles to look at, including mismatched suits, doubles, and sequences. What strategy is best? There's no way of knowing without drawing on previous knowledge. Without constant effort to discard the tiles that don't align with your values, they will plague your hand. The capacity of 13 tiles makes it difficult to know what to keep and what to discard in each precious space. Choosing a focus is hard, especially when bombarded with messages from popular culture, which put down some aspects of one's identity and raise others. When I was young, choices were made for me on which tiles and values to keep. I was sent to Chinese school where I spent hours writing and rewriting characters until stroke order was drilled into my skull. My small class of 3 consisted of different levels of Chinese, and I felt self-conscious every time I read in my American accent. My voice would shake, but I refused to be silent. My parents guided me, making sure my hand was filled with Chinese characters of doubles and triples, a powerful hand. Victory meant happiness. There was a balance in my household. Chinese characters beside English letters, Ni Hao Kai Lan with Curious George. I prospered, constantly asking my parents to take me gai to see the world. Culture, however, wasn't explicitly embraced in elementary and middle school. My parents couldn't advise me on which tiles to keep there. The tiles I held proudly to my heart were deemed unimportant every time that Chinese nosies were called. My confidence was shaken when I was mistaken for another Asian classmate. Worst of all, because I wasn't prompted to speak Chinese, I stopped. Consumed by 5 days a week of alienation from my identity at school and only 1 of feeling whole at Chinese school, I shunned my strokes, books, and heritage because victory no longer seemed viable if I held on to my Chinese culture. I instead clung to volleyball and followed friends. I discarded my Chinese tiles one by one until my beautiful pairs and triples were gone. In their place would be a mixed hand of all suits, a low-value hand. The tiles in my hand spelled a path to Gai Wu, or chicken hand, a shallow win of fitting in. A small victory, yet I had lost myself and felt incomplete. Once the round of K through 8 school was over, I chose new classes, a different path, a chance to reevaluate. Shoveling the tiles that were once Gai Wu, it was time to work for a better hand and a bigger win. The Chinese language program and Asian Pacific American Club at high school made me realize that Chinese culture didn't have to be hidden away at school, that it could be put on full display and flourish. Through this realization, I brought back my favorite triples and pairs through painstaking efforts, sifting tiles in and out of my hand as they were dealt. As I learned what I valued, my hand became more of what I envisioned, and I gained confidence in my own skin. Although I can read a little more now, I occasionally need Google Translate to get my message across. Learning through the paths I have taken has made me realize that being Asian American isn't always easy. Yet the struggle for a hard-earned win has made me more whole and colorful, just like the green dragon tile. Thank you.
Bella Wang will now be introduced. She is the recipient of the Resilience Award. Bella is a junior at BHS and a graduate of Lawrence School. As a member of the Drama Society, Bella brings stories to life behind the scenes as a stage manager, light technician, but also as a dancer and actor. Beyond the spotlight, she's a teacher at Language Virtual and volunteers at Lexington Chinese School. Writing her essay was a journey of self-discovery for Bella, reflecting on her own experience as an Asian in theater. Bella dedicates her essay to her mom and dad, who have shown her unwavering support and encouragement. And she doesn't know if her dad knows that much about theater, but notes that after every show, he tells her how great a job she did. Please come on up, Bella.
At the end of our dress rehearsal, my director stopped me with the same critique he had written in all his emails. Try to speak up. We need more volume from you. The last time I tried to speak out, I said Colosseum instead of Colosseum, the entire drama class erupting into laughter. Staring at the word as it appeared in the script, the director urged me to continue, but nothing came out. I asked for the pronunciation again, like a fool, incapable of speaking my native language, the very language I had spoken every day of my whole life. I shoved the phone in my back pocket, knowing that tomorrow I would be forced to return to this nightmare of reality. Rehearsals on the weekends allowed actors to bond during lunch, the sole break we received in between runs. I watched as forks were stabbed into pasta while I carefully picked up xiaolongbao from my thermos with my chopsticks, trying to avoid the soup from spilling out. I scanned to see if anyone was scrunching their nose at the pungent aroma of pork and cabbage. My mother had suggested bringing a sandwich, warning me of what other kids would think of my xiaolongbao, but I insisted on my favorite Asian delicacy, what Americans call soup dumplings. With all the other students in the cafeteria, I chose to abandon my thermos, chowing down pizza that tasted like garlic bread. Stepping foot into my first drama class, the only class I made sure to sign up for, I searched for a familiar face. But when I was met by white faces, I stood in the doorway, hesitant, wanting to secretly slip away. Feeling as if my acting had improved, I bravely auditioned for the freshman play, only to find out that I had a pitiful 5 lines that barely made up a full sentence. From then on, everything was theater. Reviewing my lines every night, I made sure to enunciate each word. You have to get them right. The show is tomorrow. Classes the next day were a blur as I watched students raising their hands high while I lowered mine. I knew the answers, but I began to fear my own voice, my Chinese accent being pushed forward. The teachers that used to look in my direction now looked elsewhere, as if they had already seen my defeat. My knees were shaking as I stepped onto the stage, looking into the audience that was anticipating my performance. I fumbled over my lines, messing up every scene, my volume growing quieter and quieter, wondering if there was a possibility I could stand on the stage, the audience just staring. Why couldn't I speak? Just speak, Bella, just speak, like everyone else, loudly, confidently. English was my native tongue, but at home, I spoke Chinese, went to Chinese school on the weekends, and ate Chinese food nearly every day. I was born in America, But why didn't I feel American? I wish I could ask my mother for acting advice, ignoring the language barrier, separating her from the rest of the adults in the audience. In our class post-show discussions, my peers discussed how they sat down with their parents, going through the show scene by scene, finding the uniqueness and vulnerability we presented. I see parents outside the auditorium with bouquets of fresh flowers, while I stand on the side, waiting for me to get out of my costume. Seeing what the other kids received, I bury my disappointment under my feet until they place a plate of xiaolong bao in front of me, a smile emerging from the corner of my mouth. Sometimes I ask myself why I chose theater, when I don't have the confidence it takes to stand on stage, the confidence needed to respond to a simple question proposed by my teachers. My mother says I have a fear of public speaking, but when I say words in Chinese, they flow together, like they're all connected on a piece of string, without me needing to think about what to say next. My peers speak their lines with ease, coming up with character choices, while my only focus is on my pronunciation. I aspire to be like them someday, standing front and center stage. But for now, I'll hide behind the backdrop, watching my peers shine on the stage that's theirs, which one day, hopefully, will be mine too.
Wow, that was a great essay, and you were shining tonight. So let's give her another round of applause. Okay. Yes. Congratulations to all our winners. Thank you so much for your courage and for coming tonight and sharing your essays with us. So I'd now like to introduce the wonderful and talented Talmadge Nardi. She's a BHS English teacher and a super fan of Mira T. Lee, and she's going to introduce Mira. Please welcome. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all those students who shared your beautiful work with us. And also thanks to BAAFN for inviting me and also just for hosting this event. If you don't know, they play a huge role in the community. I see some librarians in the audience. A lot of our library books of AAPI authors have stickers in the front indicating that they've been donated from BAAFN. And I think they've empowered a lot of student voice in Brookline, certainly at the high school. I don't know if any of you are old enough, young enough to have been in the group that presented to teachers a few years ago about how they wanted more AAPI authors in the curriculum. I see some nods, but we hear you, we've heard you, and there's lots of new additions, including the new Asian American Literature course at the high school. So lots of good activism from our students and our parent community. No surprise here in Brookline. So I'm also excited because you asked for some fabulous Asian American authors. And the Mira's book, Everything Here is Beautiful, is in the English, call it the English closet. It doesn't sound as exciting as that way, but is on the shelves as one of the options for 11th grade teachers. And so many of our 11th grade American literature courses teach her book. So if you're I see some younger students in the audience, maybe you'll read her at the high school. This is the third time I've gotten to introduce her to a group of students. And I just want to put out there that the first time that she came to my school, our students had read her for about 4 weeks. And when she came in, one student very spontaneously ran up to her in the auditorium and embraced her in a gigantic bear hug. So that's an option afterwards if you're interested. But that's the kind of effect that she has on people. Every year that I've taught this book, students have said it was their favorite book of the whole year. And I think there are a few reasons for that. No offense, Fitzgerald. First, it opens up conversations about the complexity of family. It's a theme that we heard in many of the speeches. It also breaks open the stigma around mental health. And a lot of students during this unit will come up and say, like, you know, everybody knows somebody who has mental illness or families that are dealing with these issues, friends, peers in school. and nobody knows what the right space is to talk about it. And so reading her book in class opens up a lot of those conversations, and had a lot of very heartfelt, sometimes tear-ridden conversations with students about their experiences. And then I started to write this phrase, I think there's something about generational trauma, but then I realized there's actually a better phrase, and I would call it generational joy, that comes through in her book. I think it's a book that answers the question, how do we pass down both the messy and the beautiful aspects of our families to the next generation? And I think all of your stories did that so beautifully tonight. And so thank you, Mira, for being here to inspire our next generation of writers and graphic designers, which is her real full-time job.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. That was so nice. I'm so glad to see Talmadge again, because I do remember, going into her, it wasn't just a classroom, I think it was like a whole grade, and walking into this room, and these kids were they ran over to me as if they knew me because they had read my book. And that was like such an amazing feeling. Also, because when I wrote this book, I didn't expect it to really appeal to high school students or be read in classrooms. And so, knowing that it is taught in classrooms just brings me a lot of joy. So I am so honored to be here, to have this opportunity to speak with everyone, but especially the amazing young people. Your thoughtfulness and candor and insightfulness into your journey so far is really inspiring. And I have to say, I did read your essays before, but hearing you speak them aloud and say them aloud actually just brought a lot. I feel like, just brought this extra layer that was really lovely. So thank you. As Talmadge, mentioned, I am an author. I'm a novelist. My book is Everything Here is Beautiful. I'm also a parent. I have 2 kids. They're 14 and 12, so just slightly younger than this set. But they give me a pretty good window into the world of young people. I also conduct college interviews for the university where I did my undergrad, with Stanford. And so I've done that for several years now. And I've really appreciated having that opportunity to engage with highly energetic and motivated high school students. One thing I have noticed is that we, and by that I mean adults and parents and society, we expect a lot from our young people. At 16, 17, 18 years of age, students are expected to be able to state their academic interests, extracurricular passions, strengths and weaknesses, the defining moments of their lives, anticipated college majors, post-college aspirations, grand plans for the futures, and also how they're going to save our planet. So I think this can translate into a lot of pressure on teenagers to feel like they need to know exactly what they're doing with their lives. And some students may have a clear idea of where they're headed. My husband likes to tell the story about a kid he went to school with. This kid was obsessed with dinosaurs. He drew pictures of dinosaurs and played with dinosaur action figures, and he wrote dinosaur stories. And he'd go to the library and read the same dinosaur books over and over again, memorizing all the random dinosaur facts. And even in high school, he was still drawing dinosaurs in the margins of his notebooks. The kid just loved dinosaurs. And guess what? He is a world-famous paleontologist now. He got his degrees in geology and organismal biology, wrote a thesis on Mesozoic ungulates, and he's now the curator of the Dinosaur Hall at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. So that is so cool, right? Well, that is so not my story. When I was 16, 17, 18, applying to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I told myself I did, and if people asked, I would give an answer because I had to, but I really didn't know. And I never, ever would have predicted that I would write a book. So I guess what I want to talk about this evening is my own windy path and how I came to be an author. I did have slides prepared for this that would show, like my childhood and kind of like silly pictures, but unfortunately can't use them. So the power of words will have to be enough. So I grew up in a pretty typical Asian American family. We lived in a modest suburb of Buffalo, New York, in a predominantly white neighborhood where kids rode their bikes to the corner store to buy Slurpees and free ranged outside until the streetlights came on. My dad was a professor of theoretical physics, my mom, a librarian. Both were first generation immigrants with families who had fled China during World War II and settled in Hong Kong. Both came to the States for graduate school, my mom with $3 in her pocket, as she liked to remind us. I was the middle child, older brother, younger sister. Cantonese was our first language, and we'd get in big trouble if we were caught speaking anything else in the house. My mom cooked Chinese dishes. Beef with tomato was my favorite. Sometimes on the weekends, we'd drive 2 hours across the Canadian border to get dim sum in Toronto's Chinatown. This meal was inevitably followed by grocery shopping in poorly lit Chinese markets where buckets of live crabs and dead fish lined the entryway, and the narrow aisles were packed with dried mushrooms, braised gluten, spicy bamboo shoots, fermented bean curd. Grocery shopping was so boring. In elementary school, I was your basic introvert, good at math, played classical piano. I was proud of this identity, smart Chinese girl who plays piano. I was not one of those kids who was always drawing or pretending or scrawling in a journal. I don't recall being particularly imaginative, and I was not, and still am not, by any means, a natural storyteller. I was a reader. I remember in second grade, there was a fundraiser at my school called the MS Readathon. Kids would raise money for multiple sclerosis research by asking neighbors or relatives to sponsor you for reading, like a penny or a nickel for each book you read in this month-long period. We didn't have any relatives, but we did have this one neighbor down the street who pledged me 50 cents a book. This was several decades ago. So today, that'd be roughly equivalent to $2 a book. Anyway, most kids for this readathon read 10, 12, maybe 15 books. I read 82. My parents were completely mortified. You can imagine this little Chinese girl knocking on the neighbor's door and being like, "Mr. Wasserman, you owe me $164. My mom was like, "Stop reading. Your daddy give you the money." So I was a reader, a pianist, a middle child, sister, daughter, overachiever. Chinese American was deeply rooted in my identity, so fundamental that it actually wasn't something I thought a lot about. One random thing I liked to do as a kid, line up all my crayons and judge them like they were in a beauty contest. First prize usually went to cornflower blue, though sometimes silver or magenta, depending on my mood. I did the same with playing cards. In just about every deck, Jack of Spades was #1 most aesthetically pleasing, followed by Jack of Hearts. I also liked the Ace of Spades for its simplicity. But writing? No. In middle school, I moved to Hong Kong with my mom and sister. Suddenly, I had relatives. Lots. Aunts, great-aunts, uncles, cousins. Suddenly, I realized my Chinese was not very good. One aunt called me a banana. I went to a British international school where the kids made fun of my American accent. Suddenly, I was the Yankee. We wore school uniforms. I had to play netball and field hockey. I learned French and German and how to make scones. Then I aced the first form maths exam and won a prize in a piano competition. And I was back to the smart American girl who plays the piano. I actually loved those years living abroad in Hong Kong. They gave me a perspective that has carried through my entire life. But writing? No. For high school, I returned to the States, to the same house I'd grown up in suburban Buffalo. In 9th grade, my dad signed me up for 10th and 11th grade math classes, which immediately flagged me as weird. I had an excellent biology teacher, so I liked biology. My friends joined yearbook, so I joined too. I loved typography and layouts, which were still done by hand with L squares back in those days. I played piano in pit orchestra. In college, I needed to major in something. I tried computer science, but those CS kids were way too hardcore. Since I was a physicist's daughter, there was an expectation that I would stick with science, so I majored in biology. After college, I needed to earn a living, so I moved to Boston and found a job as a research technician at MIT in a genetics lab that studied the Y chromosome. Lab work was a new experience for me. I got my own spot at the bench, my own set of pipettes, did a lot of pipetting, transferring minuscule amounts of liquid from this tube to that tube, then spinning things down in the centrifuge. I liked my lab mates. I loved the postdoc I was working with, so I thought I loved biology. And molecular biologist. That sounded so good and appropriately impressive. So I took the GREs, applied to PhD programs, and was accepted to several. I was glad to be on track to becoming a promising young scientist and a good Asian American daughter. Then, the graduate programs invited prospective students to visit, and while I was out in California, I stayed at a friend's house. He had a drum set in his living room, so I sat down behind it. He said, "Yeah, play quarter notes on the hi-hat, 1 and 3 on the kick, 2 and 4 on the snare." I did. And that's when everything changed. I fell in love with the drums instantaneously. Piano, whatever. I returned home to Boston, obsessed, determined to play the drums. It's not the easiest instrument to take up in the middle of the city. Also, I was a 23-year-old Asian American woman. Female drummers, not really a thing. Karen Carpenter, Sheila E., that was about it. And Asians, this was way before K-pop. I didn't know Asians could even play non-classical music. Asian female drummers, unheard of. Also, to my mom, rock musicians were equivalent to drug addicts. There was zero distinction between the two. I did not care. The next prospective grad student event I went to, the biology department threw a party at the MFA with white tablecloths and fancy hors d'oeuvres and a funk band in the rotunda. Instead of mingling with the faculty, I ended up chatting with the drummer. I wasn't sure what to make of this feeling, this passion for drums that seemed to eclipse everything else all of a sudden. Intellectually, it seemed wrong, frivolous, but it also felt like something miraculous, something I'd been yearning for my entire life. I enrolled in grad school at MIT. In between classes, I'd go to this dingy rehearsal space I'd rented in this dilapidated warehouse in Charlestown. It was a huge building, 4 stories, 99% male, and always reeked of BO, pot, and fresh-baked, honey-glazed donuts because there was some industrial bakery on the ground floor. Also, people there did not seem to know how to flush the toilet. But the guys there were nice to me, and the place was my haven. I would practice 2, 3, 4 hours a day, far more than I had ever practiced the piano, and it never felt like work. Also, that drummer I met at the MFA, we dated for a while. He introduced me to his musician friends. I was the MIT biology girl. But at MIT, I was starting to feel like an imposter. I wasn't sure who the real me was. At the end of my first year, I went to see my biochemistry professor, who was also the graduate student advisor, Frank. I told Frank I wanted to take a leave of absence. To do what? He asked. To go to Berkeley. In California, he said. No, Berkeley School of Music across the river. I had applied and gotten a scholarship. But I'll come back, I promised. I will get my PhD. I will become that promising young scientist. I'm just taking a little break. Now, my professor could have reacted in any number of ways, with disapproval, disappointment, dismissiveness, disdain, but he didn't. He said, go for it. Go and come back. So I became Berkeley student, a new world. I met musicians. I played in bands. I practiced in the dingy warehouse space. I started an all-Asian female vocal jazz quartet. We gigged all over New England. It was exhilarating. But as promised, after a year, I returned to MIT. I worked in the lab. I dissected vomeronasal organs in mice. I pipetted. And in between experiments, I'd sneak off to my practice space in the dingy warehouse and play along to Charlie Parker or Art Blakey or Bill Evans. And as that year went on, I felt more and more uncomfortable because an inconvenient truth was dawning on me. I didn't really want to be a scientist. It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to spend my entire life playing drums or becoming a professional musician. It was more that the drums had allowed me to see a different version of myself, one in which my identity was a little more malleable, a little more expansive, a little less predictable. I wasn't just an overachieving pianist, molecular biologist daughter. I could be someone else, even if I didn't know who else just yet. One thing I had to be, though, was a quitter. because to do something different, I first had to leave my PhD program, and that was hard. Frank, the graduate student advisor, he supported me. In fact, he remained my most trusted mentor for years. He even officiated my wedding, and he's now teaching my 12-year-old the art of baking bread. And my parents? Well, of course, I was terrified that they'd be angry and think of me as a disappointment and a failure, especially when I, my overachieving self, wondered if I was a disappointment and a failure. But my physicist dad, he surprised me. He respected my decision. He supported me completely. He said, "Degrees are hardly the most important things in life. You'll be happiest if you love what you do because you will do it every day." I was lucky. He provided the grounding that gave me the confidence to pursue my own path. He taught me unconditional love. So I left biology, I played music, and to support myself, I decided I would start over from scratch, pursue something I'd always been interested in, but never thought it was okay to do. Remember the crayon contests? Turns out my love of colors, patterns, typography, and design had never gone away. They were my dinosaurs. So I became a graphic designer. I took some classes, put together a portfolio, worked at design studios and dot-com startups in New York City. Eventually, I moved back to Cambridge, started my own design business. I've been doing that ever since. Somewhere in there, I also spent several years addicted to salsa dancing, which I won't get into. I also painted, and my paintings became the basis of a startup venture I co-founded, a tween apparel and accessories company called G9 Girl, G9 being tech shorthand for genius. So there I was, biology major, grad school dropout, drummer, graphic designer, salsa dancer, startup co-founder, otherwise known as my youth. Eventually I got married, I had 2 kids. So now, where does writing fit in? Well, I was 36 years old, ancient, when I first tried to write something. And I decided to try for one very specific reason. I had a story that I was burning to tell. It was about my mother, as first stories often are. She had battled leukemia for many years, and when she had her 4th relapse, she decided that was it. She'd had enough, no more chemo, no more treatments, she was done. So in 2004, I, along with my siblings, went home to Buffalo to wait for her to pass away. It was February. It was bleak. She chose to be in the hospital because she said that death in a house makes the house unlucky. And as you can imagine, it was not a fun time. But surprisingly, I found those cold, dark weeks were full of unexpectedly joyful moments, and it was fraught and emotional, intense, but also strangely mundane. I remember walking into my mom's hospital room, straight from a 7-hour drive from Boston. I'd been listening to sad music, Beck, Nick Drake, Barber's Adagio for strings, and I had been thinking about all these things I wanted to say to her, like meaningful things. But before I could even take off my coat, the first thing my mother said to me was, "Noi, you go to H&R Block, file my income tax." I was like, "You're dying, Mom. You're thinking about the IRS?" We did have tender moments, but we also bickered and fought like we always did. And it was somber, but ridiculous, love-evoking, but also guilt-inducing. And I just remember ping-ponging through all these conflicting emotions, and it kind of fascinated me. I've always been drawn to stories with contradictions, especially where humor and pathos come together. And I've always been compelled by questions and situations that have no right or wrong answers, the kind that make you squirm because good people are in conflict with each other, even though no one is at fault. And I thought, there is a great story here, and I want to write it. I need to write it. And even though I was 36 years old, ancient, and had never written anything before, I remembered. I was 10 when I moved to Hong Kong, 23 when I sat down behind the drum set, 27 when I decided to become a designer, 31 when I discovered salsa dancing, and 33 when I started a company. So I wrote. It ended up being a short story called While We Waited, and it was published by a literary journal called the Southern Review. So I thought, great, I told the story I wanted to tell. That's it, I'm done. But then I thought, well, maybe I'll try to write another story. So I did, and then another. And I inched my way along this writerly path. It turns out I really love words. I love sentences. I love the rhythms of sentences, the sounds of sentences, and constructing paragraphs of sentences that minimize word count while maximizing impact. Still, books were massive projects, and I never had any desire to write a book. Until one day, I did. Everything Here is Beautiful was another passion project. It's fiction, but also deeply personal. The ideas for the novel started percolating in my head when my kids were very young and I had no time or energy to write. But I did have this cast of characters from my stories who I loved. And I kept thinking of these horrible predicaments I wanted to put them in, moral dilemmas I wanted them to grapple with. Questions like, what happens when you're married to one person but find yourself in love with another? What happens when what you want for yourself isn't in the best interests of your child? And what happens when someone you love desperately needs help but refuses to get it? Do you insist? How? And at what point do you have to step back and watch them crash and burn? What emerged was a big, messy, cross-cultural family drama about two Chinese American sisters and how their lifelong bond is put to the test as the younger, Lucia, struggles with a serious mental illness, schizophrenia. The book is also cross-cultural, starring the men in the sisters' lives, a one-armed Israeli who owns an organic market in Manhattan's East Village, a well-intentioned Swiss urologist, and an undocumented Ecuadorian immigrant with a baby daughter and conflicting family loyalties. At its heart, the story is about complicated family relationships and how much we're willing to sacrifice for the ones we love. I have to say, when I started writing this book, the literary landscape was nothing like the way it is today. Now we have Asian American authors everywhere, writing in every possible genre: lit fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, children's, romance, graphic novels, memoir, you name it. And Asian faces are all over the media. Crazy Rich, K-pop, Shang-Chi, Never Have I Ever. We're Oscar winners, superheroes, comedians, storytellers, entertainers. Just in the short span of my kids' lifetimes, we've made remarkable gains in being seen and heard. But back when I was first writing, Asian Americans were still pretty much invisible, and mental illness was still very much a taboo topic. Back then, our stories were limited to the immigrant experience or stereotypical tropes focused on our Asianness. And at one point, I actually considered making all of my characters white because I was afraid no one would ever publish a book with such a bizarre cast of diverse characters. But my characters never seemed bizarre to me. They reflected the world as I knew it, and this was a story I wanted to tell. So I wrote, for 2.5 years, 4 drafts, 90,000 words. Eventually, I found my amazing literary agent, who worked with me on another draft, and then sold the book at auction to my editor at Viking Penguin. From concept to publication, about 5 years, plus those other 5 years I'd spent working on short stories, but who's really counting? So, finally, Asian American, biology major, grad school dropout, drummer, graphic designer, salsa dancer, startup co-founder, mom, short story writer, published author. The first, Asian American, is a label given to me by virtue of where I was born and who I was born to. But the rest, at age 16, 17, 18, I never could have predicted that I would do any of those things. What I've come to understand is that our identities are so much more than what we look like, what food we ate growing up, how others see us, what languages our parents spoke, what their occupations were, or who they or anyone else thought we should be. My identity is also more than what I do, because as I've learned, what I do changes, and I'm still evolving. My old professor, Frank, he said something to me a long time ago, something that I carry to this day. Passions are not accidents. If you are a passionate person and just a little bit lucky, you will keep finding things to be passionate about for your entire life. As young people, the world is constantly asking, who are you? And you may feel the need to give an answer. But remember, you are dynamic, you are adaptable. You may fit into this group now, that group later, but in the end, you are an individual. You will find your own path, and you will surprise yourself. Allow yourself to be surprised. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mira. That was incredible. Thank you. One more time for Mira Teely, please. Um, time for a couple questions, Mira. Are you okay with it? Yeah, if we can have time for like one or two questions, if any of the audience has one for Mira. I have a question. When you were 16, 17, 18, and they were asking you what you were going to do, what was your answer?
What did I say? Oh, I said I wanted to be like a Renaissance person. I wanted to like study philosophy when I went to college because that was something I'd never done before. And I gave some kind of vague answer like that, like, oh, I just want to, study everything, because I don't know anything about anything. So, and then I think I said, I want to be some kind of scientist because I really thought that was what I was supposed to do. Yeah. Did my siblings influence me in any way? Not really. My brother, I think he was a math major. He was 6 years older though, so he was quite a bit older and kind of out of the house. Kind of before, I was kind of thinking about things. So I knew that I didn't want to go to college a year early. He went to college a year early, and it turned out not to be the best decision. So I just knew that I wanted to take my time.
Okay, last question.
So if you haven't read the book yet, you have to read it. It's really good. And so I finished it today, and there's 4 different parts. So I'm wondering, the last part, did you know that you were going to write that, or did that evolve in your writing? The last part of my book. Yeah, so it's interesting because I had this idea that I was going to write just 4 chapters for this book, and this book has far more than 4 chapters, and it goes back and forth between the characters. But I thought it was going to be very linear, one character, one section, and that was going to be it. So I did kind of know the ending of the book, but there was big gaps where I didn't know how I was going to get there. And then I did rearrange the sequence of events also. So initially I had a foreword, like a prologue that kind of revealed the end of the book. And then one of my readers said, I think you should take that out because it's kind of letting the air out of the story. And so, so I shifted things around. So I think I knew what the final ending was going to be, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. One more time, Mira, please. Okay. So we are winding down tonight. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Brookline Community Foundation, and all of our BAAFN sponsors. That's BAP Korean Restaurant, Brookline Booksmith, the Council of Korean Americans, Mint Julep, Olive Connection and the Saposnick family, Susan Park Books, Praise Shadows Art Gallery, John Hodgman, and Giles Lee and Sopat Tech for the wonderful sponsorship to make this event happen. Also, thank you to our prize sponsors, Brookline Booksmith and Mistral and Columbus Hospitality Group. I'd like to thank the Coolidge Corner Theatre and for their generosity in donating this space to BAAFN today. Is Blair Bean in the room? Right, Blair, please. Blair was incredible. Her help in making this today happen and have it run smoothly. Also, thank you to Camille Park for her lovely program design. I'd also like to thank the BAAFN Steering Committee, particularly Grace Watson on the administrative end for the essay contest to get that going, and also Linda Louie for her masterful work managing logistics today. Is Grace and Linda, is Linda in here? Oh, Linda. All right, please wave. And I've heard from a number of people that there are teachers and other employees of the school district here today. Could I just ask you all to wave? Just let us know you are the reason. You're the reason that we're able to do this. You're the reason why our students are able to be such contributing members of our society here in Brookline. So thank you to all. Thank you for being here tonight. I will ask Susan to come up and close us out.
Thank you, Giles. And thank you to Giles for all the wonderful work he did in preparing for this wonderful event, too. Thanks, Giles. So we just want to thank all of you for being here. We have a reception planned. We have pizza and cake and drinks. And Mira will be up here. If you want to purchase her book, if you want her to sign it, she will be here. So you can form a line this way for the food and this way for any book signing. But also, if you look at the back of your program, because May is AAPI Heritage Month, that is why we had this event today, and it continues on into Saturday. And so you can see the poster on the back. We hope that you will be able to come and you can share the words, spread this wonderful event. It's Saturday. It starts from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and it starts at 11 at the Hunneman Hall in the Brookline Village Library. And there will be Vincent E. He's the author and creator of The World of a Zen, and we have a special guest moderator, Stephanie Fan. And at 12, the students are able to participate in crafts, there's food, there's student performances, a whole lot of fun things. So you can check it out on the back flyer on the back of the program. So thank you once again, and we hope you had a wonderful evening, and we're excited for next year. So come on back next year. Thank you, everyone.